Jim. Morning, Jim.
Hello, Tim. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you. Street of the Dead, Binchester. Why is
Street
it
of the
afraid?
Dead, yeah, that was definitely well in the core of my sort of time with Time team. Brilliant. I mean, what can I say about it? I don't, in this modern era, I don't want to say spoilers, but then we're talking about a show that people have probably seen already. But yeah, the discoveries are. I will just say the discoveries are extraordinary. There's a rather wonderful scene between Tony and Guy de la Bedouere, where Guy, forgive me, Guy, hams it up to the most ludicrous degree, which he quite often does, and that's quite funny. But yeah, that's a great example of something that led to I think it was University of Durham, led to years of excavation because nobody had anticipated that the preservation was that good. So definitely worth a watch.
It was one of those things where it was a very rich area. There was a vicus, there was an early fort. They'd been previous excavations.
In the fort, they had.
But the big thing was, which I think Guy was very good at identifying for us, was the possibility that the road leading to the fort would be a site of burials.
Yes.
And typically, and again, that was Guy's classics training and one thing and another. By knowing all these sites like he did, he knew that by and large the Romans liked to bury the dead outside the fort.
Yeah. Well, wealthy, high status individuals were buried in mausolea, close to the walls. Other people further away. So, I mean, in fact, there's a shot in Gladiator, Ridley Scott's film, which is a wide shot of the approach to Rome. And what I always loved about it is, it's obviously CG, but there's a road in the shot that goes into Rome, and you can see the mausolea lining the road going into the city. So that reminded me of Binchester. But yeah, I mean, we're not talking sort of rubble foundations or robbed out buildings. We're talking solid 4-course high buildings with the doorways and floors intact. It's absolutely extraordinary.
I love the way these things come out in reports. The report says the central masonry structure was composed of neatly dressed yellow sandstone blocks, bonded by pale yellowish grey clay with a core of small angular sandstone fragments. The building was approximately 3.3 meters long. I mean,
thrilling. That sounds
a mausolea.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. But then, to be fair, that is a technical. That's not an interpretation. That's a technical description of the archaeology. So fair enough.
And I again, that raised that question of the Romans were with us for what, 300-400 years, say 35
in country, you mean?
Yes. That period of intensive interaction. And I was reading a thing which was, what did the local people notice the most? What did the Romans ever do for us? The classical question. So,
safe to walk the streets at night.
Roads, warm floors, which I think are just fantastic.
Genius. Yeah.
In a winter in Britain, to take your boots off like Phil and Mick did and stand on a hypercoarse, toasty floor.
Imagine that, central heating.
I'd vote for
that is civilization.
And of course, wine.
Yep.
But what you begin to see in the mosaics and these mausolea structure is where local people probably are Romanized enough to adopt the information and the cultural influence. They're putting classical characters on their floors. And I think that is why that period is so fascinating, that we became more or less Romanized in certain areas. And I think
what is Romanization? We're not talking about a bunch of Italians coming and living in the country. We're talking about the Roman world. So this is a cultural, somebody once compared it. Comparisons often made to American culture, and how the dollar, has taken over the world, and how American film and media has influenced and sort of taken over the Western world, as it were. So that's, that's a good comparison. They weren't, that doesn't mean there's a load of Americans living in Britain, but it means that we're consuming the culture of that large empire, and emulating it to a certain degree.
And I think one of the things I remember Guy saying in one of his latest books about the Romans, one of the things that the locals noticed was taxation. You had to pay your taxes. In order to pay the taxes, you need Roman coins. Mm-hmm. And of course, every Roman coin is like some advertising hoarding for the current chief of the empire.
Yeah.
You get a lovely picture of Claudius, or on the back, you get a picture of his horse riding over the figure of Europe or something. It's like, oh, every time you pay, it rubs your nose in it. And coins, I think, we always have an ambiguous reaction, I think, a bit to coins on Time Team.
It's dating evidence. That's all anyone ever says.
Yes. And there's a slight sense of, well, aren't these things you pick off the surface, with metal detecting or something like that? But those coins, when you see those emperors, and when there's a new usurper, what does he do first? Get his coins minted, get his head
Very
on,
much so.
With a wreath around his head and a victory. Mm. And again, I think if we're doing something on YouTube, we might have a bit more space. A site we're currently looking at has got 30 coins collected from the fields already. And Richard Rees's lovely point was that depending on it's a villa, a town, a market, you get a different range of coins.
Yes. And I mean, I'd like to come back to what you were saying about Guy, because, the thing about Guy that I just loved about him, that he's so good at, was that he really doesn't, he compresses the time between the Roman period and now. So there's a good example at the temple site, the Roman temple site, where he has that rather fractious scene with Tony about the kiosk. And he says it's rather like a football match. This is where you come and you buy your programs and you do, and his thing about the coins, most people would, say, and a lot of our experts did just say, that's a very interesting coin. That means that this dates to the 3rd or 4th century. It's emperor so-and-so. Well, that doesn't give you any sense of, his idea of the coin as an advertising hoarding. What a brilliant way of looking at it. That really gets you into the culture and into how real human beings interact with their material culture. Love it, So that's the kind of thing that I think if we do little YouTube segments, that's the sort of thing we need to be getting out there. Not the sort of dry stuff. The academics can, sorry, I don't do insult academics, but the academics can do all of that more technical kind of stuff. What we're trying to do is tell these stories about people,
Jim, thank you very much for your time. I know you're a very, very busy chap, one way and another.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch again next week.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Best wishes for what you're doing, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Tim.
We can't do any of this work without you, so please subscribe, back us on Patreon, and make sure that Time Team comes back again.